Oh my God. Oh my God.
Bigfoot hunted us through the wilderness on May 18, 2026, systematically destroying every shred of safety we thought we had. And Bigfoot wasn't satisfied with just mauling my 2 fellow hunters to death. The horrific things I've witnessed will be the most brutal thing you'll ever hear about him. The stench hit me before the helicopter blades finished their death spin, carcass strung up between 2 pines like a grotesque piñata, wired with motion sensors and trail cameras. And as I stood there staring at that swaying, gutted thing, I felt it before I saw it, a weight pressing down from the tree line, patient and enormous. Then the branches 30 yards out shifted apart, and for 1 full second I was looking at the broad, hunched shoulders and matted brown fur of Bigfoot, watching us from the dark like we were nothing more than the next course. I didn't say the word out loud yet. I couldn't. Draven was already tapping at his tablet, announcing that his algorithm called this prime territory bears, cougars, maybe wolves, something trophy-sized. His voice cracked through the canyon like a gunshot, a man who had never once in his life learned to whisper. Lev stood beside him, wincing at the volume, clutching a canteen like it might bite him, asking if maybe they should keep it down since this was supposed to be hunting. Draven just laughed and clapped him hard enough to stagger him, calling that the old way, saying this was the new way. Technology wins every time. I stayed back and watched the tree line instead of the carcass. The birds had gone silent, not gradually, not the usual thinning symphony of jays and thrushes fading into evening, but all at once, a hard cutoff like someone had thrown a switch. Just whine through the needles and the whine of Draven's drone circling overhead. Then his voice sharpened. Movement, he said, 60 feet northeast, a big heat signature. I raised my binoculars and saw nothing but shadow and tangled salal, but I felt the same pressure I'd felt a moment before. Heavier now, closer. I told him to wait, that it was probably a bear, that we should hold position. He was already moving, rifle up, his $20,000 thermal scope glowing green against his eye, saying his algorithm predicted a window, and we only had 15 minutes. I went after him fast and low, every footfall deliberate. I found him crouched behind a fallen log, 60 feet in, rifle trained on a thicket, whispering that he saw something. I looked where he pointed and made out a shape through the leaves, dark brown, too broad through the shoulders for a bear, the arms too long. A rock the size of a bowling ball crashed into the deer carcass 150 feet behind us. The sound was sickening, a wet crack of splintering ribs, the thud of meat hitting dirt. A second rock followed almost immediately, then a third, each one landing closer to where we crouched than the last, walking toward us with an accuracy that felt less like an animal marking territory and more like a sniper adjusting for windage. Draven spun with his rifle swinging wild, demanding to know what that was. I grabbed his shoulder and forced him down, telling him not to move, not to breathe. A second rock smashed into the tree beside us and showered us with splinters. It wasn't a miss, it was Bigfoot's message. Then I saw the arm retract into the canopy above us, thick with matted fur, moving with a fluid, deliberate strength that no bear could match. I told Draven that wasn't a bear, and he actually laughed, asking if I thought it was Bigfoot, calling that ridiculous. I was already backing away with my eyes on the canopy, telling him I thought we were being hunted, that it had been tracking us since we landed, that if we didn't move right now, we were going to die. Something in my voice finally cracked through his arrogance, and he agreed to fall back to camp. We moved fast, me leading, ducking branches, stepping over roots, my pulse hammering in my ears. Behind me, Draven tried to be quiet and failed, every step a crunch, every breath a gasp. Lev was still standing where I'd left him, surrounded by the wreckage of the bait station. The deer had been torn clean apart, its spine snapped like kindling, the motion sensors crushed, the cameras twisted into scrap. He was shaking, telling me he'd heard the crash and then seen something moving through the trees, something big that looked directly at him, with eyes that were intelligent, that knew he was there and simply didn't care. A branch cracked to our left, then another to our right, faster than before, Bigfoot circling us like it was pacing off the distance. I told them to run, and we ran. Our camp looked like a bomb had gone off in it. Tents shredded, food scattered across the dirt, every spare round of ammunition dumped out and crushed flat under something heavy. My satellite phone, our only link to the outside world, had been bent into a perfect U and left neatly on my sleeping pad, which scared me worse than the wreckage did because it meant Bigfoot had hands capable of precision, not just destruction. I walked the perimeter once, fast, cataloging everything the way I'd been taught to read a blast site. The footprints told their own story. 16 inches long, easily 8 inches across at the ball, pressed nearly 2 inches into packed dirt that hadn't taken a boot print all week. Whatever left them weighed somewhere north of 500 pounds, and Bigfoot had circled our camp 4 full times without a single snap twig loud enough to wake any of us. A 500-pound animal moving in total silence wasn't an animal at all, in any sense I understood. It was something that Bigfoot had been doing its whole life, and doing it well. Draven kept muttering the same curse over and over while his hands shook trying to reassemble his rifle. Lev sat on a log with his head down, breathing too fast. I ran the numbers the way I'd been trained to. No food, no spare ammo, no communication. 7 rounds left in my rifle, 6 in Draven's, Lev unarmed because Draven had called giving him a weapon a waste of bullets. Maybe 2 days of water if we rationed hard. I told them we needed to leave that night, weapons and water only, nothing else. Draven balked, saying we had $1,000 in gear sitting right there. I told him we had $1,000 in deadweight, that Bigfoot out there wanted us scared and trapped, and every hour we stayed put, it would get bolder. He argued for a while, demanding to know what I suggested, wandering the woods at night with no GPS and no comms. I told him I suggested we survive, which we would not do sitting still. Fear finally won out over his pride, and he agreed, though he insisted on bringing the drone, saying its battery was still full and he could scout ahead with it. I reminded him that thing had dropped a full-grown deer from 200 feet. He ignored me. Of course he ignored me. We packed in silence and moved southwest, aiming for a river I'd marked on the topo map, figuring we could follow the water down to the logging roads. Simple plan. Bigfoot had other ideas. There is much more I learned during this encounter. Things I can't openly reveal here on YouTube because they're too dark. The link in the description will lead you to everything I truly found out. Read at your own risk. We'd been walking maybe an hour when the first rock came whistling out of the dark behind us and slammed into the ground at our feet. Another warning from Bigfoot. We kept walking. I counted the interval between throws without meaning to, an old habit from counting mortar spacing, and the pattern was too even to be random. 4 seconds. Always 4 seconds, like something was pacing us step for step and choosing its moment with a metronome in its head. The second rock caught Draven's pack and spun him half around. He cursed and kept moving, faster now, glancing over his shoulder every few strides. I heard Bigfoot shift position in the brush to our right, then go silent, then shift again 10 feet closer, a slow, methodical stalk that never once let us get comfortable with the direction. The third rock caught Lev square in the ankle, and he went down screaming, clutching his leg. I dropped to my knees beside him and probed the swelling, telling him it wasn't broken, but it was going to hurt for a long while, asking if he could still walk. He tried, gasped, and sat back down. I looked at Draven, already 10 feet ahead with his rifle up, and told him to help me carry Lev. He refused outright, saying he hadn't invited Lev along to slow him down, that if Lev couldn't keep up, that was on him. Lev looked at me with his eyes wet, saying Draven had never been like this when they were kids. I told him people change and hauled him onto my back in a fireman's carry. He was lighter than I expected. Months of stress had whittled him down, but even so, 150 pounds through broken terrain in the dark was brutal on my legs within minutes. We didn't stop. We couldn't. Every few minutes, Bigfoot crashed through the brush behind us, sometimes left, sometimes right, herding us the way I'd once been trained to herd an enemy into a kill box. Keep them moving, keep them exhausted, wait for the moment they can't run anymore. That moment came at the river. I was lowering Lev onto the bank to refill our canteens when the water exploded upward. Bigfoot's massive clawed hand shot out of the current, closed around his calf, and yanked him under in a single violent motion so fast I barely had time to register movement before he was simply gone, swallowed by the black surface without so much as a splash to mark where he'd been. His scream cut off into a gurgle. I hit the water without thinking, waist deep in the current, and grabbed a fistful of his jacket collar just as something below yanked him down harder, nearly pulling me under with him. I fired 3 rounds into the water where the hand had disappeared, the muzzle flash lighting up the surface in short white bursts, and on the third shot, Bigfoot's grip released him all at once, like a hand simply letting go rather than being forced to. He surfaced, gasping and choking, thrashing against me, and I hauled him bodily onto the rocks to find his leg torn open. 4 parallel gashes running from knee to ankle, deep enough that I could see bone gleaming white in the moonlight, blood pumping in dark pulses with every heartbeat. More blood than I'd seen come out of a living person in a very long time. I ripped off my shirt and wrapped it tight around the wound, pressing hard, telling him not to move, not to let go. Draven stood on the bank staring, his face slack with horror, and for 1 second he looked like a scared kid again instead of a billionaire with a smart rifle. Then his jaw hardened, and he said Lev needed a hospital, that we had to get out of here right now. I told him we were miles from anywhere and didn't even know which direction anywhere was. He said he'd send the drone up to scout a fast route out. I told him that Bigfoot had already proven it could, but he wasn't listening anymore, and the drone was already climbing, red lights blinking against the black canopy. 10 seconds later, the video feed went dead. A heartbeat after that, the drone came screaming back down out of the dark and hit Draven square in the shoulder. I heard the bone snap clean, heard his scream tear through the canyon. His right arm hung wrong, the collarbone shattered. He couldn't shoot anymore. He could barely stand. I dragged them both under a shallow rock overhang 10 feet from the water, got Lev settled first, then Draven, who was whimpering with his arm splinted tight against his chest. I built a small fire against every instinct I had because Lev was already shivering with the first signs of hypothermia, and infection was setting into that leg fast. While I worked, I could hear Bigfoot moving through the trees in slow, deliberate circles, stopping now and then, watching us with a patience that made my skin crawl. It wasn't hunting the way an animal hunts. It was waiting the way a predator waits when it already knows the outcome and is simply enjoying the wait. Somewhere around midnight, Bigfoot started throwing its voice. That's the only way I can describe it. A low, guttural moan rolled down from the ridge to our left, and before it even finished, an answering call came from directly behind us, close enough that I felt it in my chest. 2 sounds, 2 positions, at the exact same moment. I knew then it wasn't alone out there, or else it had a way of moving faster than sound itself, doubling back on us before the echo even settled. Either possibility turned my stomach. I kept the fire low and my rifle across my knees and didn't sleep a single minute, watching the tree line shift and settle with every gust of wind, unable to tell branch from limb, shadow from shoulder. Twice more before dawn, Bigfoot moved along the ridge above the overhang, dislodging a slow trickle of gravel that pattered down onto the rocks a few feet from where Lev lay shivering. Each time I raised my rifle and tracked the sound, and each time it stopped the instant I moved, like it knew exactly how far my barrel could swing and exactly when to freeze. I started to understand that we weren't dealing with instinct out there. We were dealing with calculation. That was when the branch came out of the dark. 15 feet long, stripped bare, sharpened at the tip like a spear, and it flew across the clearing and punched straight through the last standing tent, missing Draven's skull by inches and pinning his coat to the dirt. He scrambled backwards, screaming. The message was unmistakable. It could have killed him and chose not to. And now, the fear of what came next was worse than the wound itself. Dawn broke gray and cold, and we'd survived the night. Barely. Bigfoot had made sure we got no real rest, crashing through the brush every hour, screaming somewhere in the distance, hurling rocks just to keep us jerking awake. Lev was feverish now, his legs swollen and turning dark at the edges. Draven's bravado had cracked completely, replaced by a hollow, twitchy silence. I told them Bigfoot was hurting us, pushing us deeper into the mountains and further from any road. Draven argued we should dig in and let it come to us. I told him we had nothing to dig in with. No food, no spare ammo, no real shelter, and that staying meant certain death while moving at least gave us a chance. He couldn't argue with that, so we started walking. It left us alone for nearly an hour until we found our crushed drone, its memory card placed neatly on top. The footage showed Bigfoot filming us as we slept the night before, close enough to catch our breath, shattering Draven's composure and proving it had been watching us the entire time. Moments later, Bigfoot drove us away from the river and into an abandoned ranger cabin that seemed like shelter, until a massive shape silently unfolded from behind the wood stove inside. We crashed through a boarded window, abandoned everything we owned, and fled back into the forest, realizing Bigfoot hadn't chased us there at all. It had been waiting. We hit a ravine 20 minutes later, maybe 40 feet across, and deep enough that I couldn't see the bottom through the fog rolling along it. A single downed cedar spanned the gap, wet with moss, barely wide enough for one boot at a time. There was no way around it without adding hours we didn't have, so I went first, testing each step, feeling the trunk flex under my weight. Halfway across, the whole log shuddered hard enough to nearly throw me, and I heard Bigfoot shift its grip on the far end where the roots were still half buried buried in the bank. It was testing the wood the way you'd test ice, deciding whether to drop us all 40 feet onto rock, and for 3 full seconds I stood frozen over open air with nothing under my palms but wet bark. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it started, and I understood that it hadn't wanted us dead yet. Not like that. Not from a fall. It didn't get to watch up close. I got Draven and Lev across one at a time, both of them white-knuckled and silent, and the second, Lev's good foot, hit solid ground on the far side. The cedar gave way behind us and dropped into the fog with a crash that took nearly 2 full seconds to reach the bottom. The terrain dropped into a steep valley with a stream cutting through the bottom and thick undergrowth crowding both slopes. Bigfoot was all around us now. I could hear it breathing, close, patient. Lev collapsed, clutching his ruined leg, saying he couldn't go on. I told him just a little further that there was a ridge ahead. He grabbed my hand hard and said it wanted him, that it had been playing with him since the river, that it could have killed him then and chose not to because it wanted the others to watch. I couldn't argue with that either. I'd known it since the first attack. Bigfoot was stripping us down one by one, picking the weakest link first. He begged me not to leave him alone to die, and I promised him I wouldn't, then hauled him onto my back again and started climbing. It let us get halfway up the slope before it charged. It came out of the tree line as a blur of brown fur and raw muscle, faster than anything that size had any right to move. I dropped Lev and spun with my rifle up, too slow. The hand closed on his injured leg and tore him away from me in one brutal motion. His scream was the worst sound I have ever heard, pure animal terror, and I fired 3 rounds into the dark without a clear target while Bigfoot didn't even flinch. I chased the sound of him screaming into the trees, firing blind, the canopy too thick for any moonlight to reach the ground. Branches whipped across my face hard enough to draw blood, and twice I went down over roots I never saw coming, scrambling back up without losing a stride. The screaming moved fast through the dark ahead of me, dragged along at a speed no human body could produce on its own, veering left, then hard right. Then suddenly straight up, the sound rising into the canopy itself before it cut off mid-note. Then the screaming stopped. I found his rifle first, snapped clean in half, and left, lying in the open like a taunt. Then I found him, still breathing, barely. His body had been folded wrong in a dozen places, ribs caved in, blood pouring from wounds I couldn't count. His eyes found mine and held there for one long second before he told me to run, and then he was gone. I don't know why I picked him up. I couldn't leave him there. I hauled his body back through the trees and set him down at Draven's feet, telling him his friend was dead. Draven's face ran through shock, then grief, then something else entirely, something I'd seen before in soldiers who'd been pushed past their breaking point. He started screaming into the trees that he would kill it, that it would pay, and he emptied his entire magazine into the darkness, 6 rounds wasted on nothing but shadow. Bigfoot used the gunfire as cover. It dropped from the canopy behind him before the echo even finished rolling down the valley, a full 15 feet of falling weight that hit the ground without so much as a grunt of effort, and had its arms around his chest before he'd even registered the shadow crossing over him. He got out half a syllable, not even a full word, before the grip closed. I heard his ribs shatter one after another, a rapid stutter of cracks like knuckles popping, and then his body folded backward over a fallen cedar with a crunch that I still hear some nights when I close my eyes. His rifle clattered onto the rocks, empty, useless, and his legs kept twitching for 2 or 3 seconds after everything above his waist had already gone still, and then he was dead too. 2 of them, gone in the space of 10 minutes, and it was just me now. I didn't wait. I didn't grieve. I ran. The forest turned into a blur of green and gray and the failing light of late afternoon. I had no direction, only instinct, legs pumping, lungs burning. Bigfoot was right behind me, close enough that I swear I could feel the heat of its breath on the back of my neck. I zigzagged through the brush, ducked under low branches, vaulted fallen logs, anything to break its line on me, and none of it mattered. It was always there, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a weight pressing at my back. My grandfather used to tell me that fire was the one thing the old ones in these mountains still feared, and that moving water was the one thing they could never track through. I had no fire yet, but I could hear the river ahead, a low roar promising a way out if I could reach it in time. I threw myself down a steep mountainside, tumbling end over end through dense brush that clawed at my face, arms, and legs until every patch of exposed skin burned. Behind me, Bigfoot let out another roar, deeper and louder than anything I had ever heard, a sound so powerful it rattled my ribs and shook fresh snow loose from the pine branches overhead. The noise echoed through the valley like an avalanche breaking apart. I could hear Bigfoot crashing through trees somewhere uphill, but unlike me, it wasn't stumbling or sliding. Every heavy footfall landed with slow, deliberate force, as if the creature knew it had all the time in the world. I threw my weight downhill, desperate to gain even a few more seconds, but every breath burned, and every stride felt weaker than the last. Halfway down the slope, my legs slammed into a fallen cedar hidden beneath the brush. The impact flipped me completely over it, and I crashed shoulder first into the frozen ground before rolling twice across loose rocks. I finally stopped against a granite boulder, catching myself with both hands, instantly peeling the skin from my palms. Blood mixed with dirt as I forced myself upright without even looking at the injuries. Above me, I caught movement through the trees. Bigfoot crossed the ridge almost effortlessly, weaving between trunks with impossible speed despite its enormous size. It stayed several dozen yards above my position, matching every turn I made, as though it already knew exactly where I intended to go. The measured thuds of Bigfoot's footsteps echoed across the hillside, each one carrying enough weight to vibrate through the ground beneath my boots. Another 100 feet down, the forest suddenly disappeared beneath me as the hillside turned into a steep scree field covered in loose shale. Every step sent rocks sliding downhill, making it impossible to keep my footing. I half ran and half fell, desperately trying to stay upright, while chunks of stone skidded around my ankles. Behind me came another deafening crack. I looked up just long enough to see a massive boulder, nearly the size of a washing machine, bouncing violently down the slope directly toward me. Somewhere above, Bigfoot had launched it with terrifying strength. I threw myself sideways just before it blasted past, close enough that the rush of air slapped my face and sprayed me with shattered stone. I didn't dare look back. Knowing Bigfoot was still above me was terrifying enough. The scree finally leveled into a narrow clearing. Ahead, roughly 100 yards away, a river churned with violent spring runoff, white water smashing itself against dark rocks before disappearing downstream. There was almost no chance I could cross it alive. Worse, there was absolutely no cover between my position and the riverbank. If Bigfoot reached open ground before I found somewhere to hide, the chase would be over. Off to my left stood a dead pine tree, blackened by an old lightning strike and dried almost completely hollow. Beside it rose a rock face coated with thick green moss that glistened with moisture. I glanced from the tree to the river and then back toward the forest behind me, listening as Bigfoot's crashing footsteps grew louder with every passing second. I made my decision in less than a heartbeat. I sprinted toward the dead pine, grabbed the driest branch I could wrench loose, and snapped it free with both hands. Splinters dug into my palms as I hurried toward the rock face, tearing away thick handfuls of moss that came free in damp clumps. I knew it wasn't ideal tinder, but it was the only thing available. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped everything. Then the forest behind me suddenly went quiet. The silence lasted only a moment before Bigfoot stepped out from between the trees and entered the clearing. For the first time, nothing blocked my view. There was no doubt anymore that Bigfoot was real. Every terrifying detail stood exposed beneath the gray afternoon sky. Bigfoot stood easily 15 feet at the shoulder, its enormous body covered in long, dark fur, matted with mud, pine needles, and streaks of old dried blood. Thick scars crossed its chest and arms, suggesting years of violent encounters that somehow hadn't slowed it down. Its hands looked almost human until I noticed the fingers ended in black, worn claws thick enough to split tree bark. But what froze me in place were Bigfoot's eyes. They weren't wild or animalistic. They watched me with unmistakable intelligence, calmly measuring every movement I made, as though calculating exactly how long I had left. My stomach dropped. Then Bigfoot lowered its shoulders and charged across the clearing with horrifying speed, closing the distance far faster than something that massive had any right to move. I lit a pine branch with my fire striker and held it between us, and for the first time Bigfoot hesitated, stopping just short of the flames instead of charging. It circled, repeatedly testing both sides of the fire until I burned the back of its hand, but the hesitation lasted only seconds before Bigfoot reared up and slammed the ground beside me with enough force to shake the earth beneath my feet. I started backing toward the river, keeping the burning branch between us the whole way. 50 yards, 40, 30. It lunged and I swung the torch across its forearm, and the fur caught, and it let out a shriek that felt like it split my skull down the middle. But it didn't run. It came on faster, and I understood in that half second that the torch was never going to be big enough, that I was maybe 4 strides from the water, and it was maybe 2 strides from me, and the numbers didn't work no matter how I ran them. So I stopped running the numbers and threw the torch instead. Not at it, past it, into the wall of dead brush and dry grass banked up behind where it stood. The tinder went up like it had been waiting all season for a match. Flame walked the brush line in both directions at once, and inside 3 seconds, there was a wall of fire between me and the last 50 yards of forest, cutting Bigfoot off from everything behind me. It reared back from the heat, and for 1 second, the only second in this whole story where I saw it hesitate, it just stood there with the fire climbing behind it, deciding. A spark had caught my sleeve somewhere in the throw. I didn't feel it until the heat crawled past my elbow, and by then, the whole cuff was burning. I didn't stop to think. I tore the jacket off over my head, burning zipper and all, and threw myself the last few feet into the river with it still smoking in my fist. The water was so cold it felt like being struck by something solid. All the air punched out of my lungs at once. It slammed me into a submerged boulder hard enough to bruise ribs, dragged me under, spun me so hard I lost every sense of which way was up, tumbling through a churning wall of white where rock and current and sky all blurred into the same gray nothing. My arms were screaming, the burns finding me all at once, now that the adrenaline had nothing left to spend, and I fought for air, found it for half a breath, lost it again as another wave rolled me under, and somewhere in that violent tumbling blur, I looked back once and saw Bigfoot standing on the far side of the fire, a black shape against the flame, not following. It didn't step into the shallows after me the way I'd braced for, and then the river bent hard to the left, and it was gone from sight, and the current pulled me under one final time before spitting me out into calmer water downstream. I don't remember much of what came after that. Cold beyond cold, the current finally letting go of me somewhere in the flats, my arms burning worse than the rest of me combined. I must have hauled myself out on instinct, because the next thing I knew, I was on my hands and knees in gravel. And past that, there was a strip of hard-packed dirt that my body somehow recognized as a road before my mind caught up to it. I don't remember walking it. I remember headlights and a logging truck grinding to a stop and a driver named Hollis half carrying me into the cab, shouting into his radio that he needed EMS at the mile marker, that there was a man in the road bleeding and burned. As the truck pulled out, I twisted around to look through the back window, out past the tree line the road cut through. On the ridge above the valley, just for a second before the trees closed over it, I saw Bigfoot standing in the open, not moving, not following. It wasn't hunting anymore. It was watching the truck go. And if I'm being honest about what I saw in that half second, and I've had a long time to decide whether I'm being honest with myself, it looked almost satisfied, the way you'd look watching something you built finally work.